Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. As someone in recovery, I'm often talking with other people who are also in recovery, who are suffering. Either something bad's happened to them, or they've gone through some kind of trauma, and they're looking for some kind of comfort. They're looking for a sympathetic ear, and as people in recovery who are doing that, we have to be careful not to say the wrong things. We have to be careful not to say things that can actually make the problem worse and increase the likelihood that someone's going to go back to seek comfort from drugs and alcohol, which, as terrible as they are, they don't judge you. And so I want to read some examples from When Bad Things Happen to Good People by Harold S. Kushner. These are some examples of things that I've heard people say to try to comfort someone that probably caused more damage than they helped. So first, he says, it is gratuitous, even cruel, to tell a person who has been hurt, whether by divorce or death or other disaster, maybe if you had acted differently, things would not have turned out so badly. When we say that, all we are really telling them is this is your fault for having chosen as you did. Some marriages fail because people are immature, or because expectations are unrealistic on both sides. Sometimes people die because they have incurable diseases, not because their families turned to the wrong doctor or waited too long to go to the hospital. Sometimes businesses fail because economic conditions or powerful competition doomed them, not because one person in charge made a wrong decision in a crucial moment. If we want to be able to pick up the pieces of our lives and go on living, we have to get over the irrational feeling that every misfortune is our fault, the direct result of our mistakes or misbehavior. We are really not that powerful. Not everything that happens in the world is our doing. That last line is so important. Not everything that happens in the world is our doing. And this is a really important idea because we have to avoid a situation where we see blame for ourselves in every single thing that happens around us. And it's important to draw a distinction between what's being said here and the work that we do to find our part in resentments in our fourth step, if you are working a program, an AA program, for example. And for those who are unfamiliar with it, in a fourth step, what we do is look at a situation in our life where we're resentful toward someone or something, and we find, what is my part in this resentment? What role did I play? Because what we find is, no matter what happens, no matter where we've been wronged in life, there's something that we did that plays a role not in the event itself, but in the resentment we feel about it. So terrible things can happen, for example, that are not our fault, but what role do we play in the resentment? And that role can be as simple as we've never talked to anybody about it. It's not saying that the event itself is our fault. It's what role do we have in maintaining that resentment? Sometimes it is saying we had some fault in this, and I've got some great examples of that from my own fourth step that I won't go into here, but what I will say is that we have to be careful not to constantly look for fault in ourselves for events that happen that we had nothing to do with. And so the other thing that we have to be careful of is not saying things, and this is especially important when people are involving God in their reasoning about these things. And I'll give an example. Let this example speak for itself. Some years ago, I officiated at the funeral of a 38-year-old woman who had died of leukemia, leaving a husband and one child, a boy of 15. As I entered the family's home after the burial, I heard an aunt say to the boy, "Don't feel bad, Barry. God took your mother because he needed her now more than you did." I give the aunt the benefit of the doubt. Surely she was trying to make Barry feel better. She was somehow trying to make sense of a horrible and tragic event. But it seems to me that she did at least three things seriously wrong in those two sentences. First of all, she told Barry not to feel bad. Yet why shouldn't he feel bad on the day of his mother's funeral? Why shouldn't he be entitled to honest feelings of pain, anger, and loss? Why should he have to censor his honest, legitimate feelings in order to make the day easier for other people? Second, she explained his mother's death in terms of God taking her away. I don't believe that. It doesn't fit my understanding of God, and it can serve only to make Barry resentful of God and less open to the comforting ministrations of religion. But most seriously of all, she suggested that God had taken Barry's mother because he needed her now more than you did. I think I understand what she was trying to say. She wanted to say that her sister-in-law's death was not meaningless, that it served some purpose in God's scheme of things. But I suspect that was not the message that Barry got. What Barry heard was, "It's your fault that your mother died. You didn't need her enough. If you had needed her more, she would still be alive." I have heard people say this kind of thing before. God needed this person more than we did. God needed this person more than you did. And it strikes me still as a very strange approach to comforting somebody. We have to be really careful that our attempts to soothe people are sometimes less successful than an attempt to sympathize with someone would be. And this comes back to a lot of us just want to fix a problem. And especially as addicts and alcoholics, a lot of us just want to fix a problem, get it fixed. And this is something that my wife has to tell me sometimes. She'll come home upset about something, she'll start talking, and then she'll stop and she'll say, "I want you to listen. I don't want you to try to fix this. I just want you to listen." And I have to turn off the part of my brain that wants to fix problems and turn on the part of my brain that's sympathetic. And what I found over time, and it continues in my recovery, is that sympathy is far more powerful in relating to other people and helping other people figure out their own problems than trying to fix those problems myself. Sympathy is a much more powerful tool and emotion in helping people get through their difficult times than trying to tell them that what happened for a specific reason, or to try to point out where they could have done things differently. That I have gotten to a point where I save those kinds of conversations only if they are clearly appropriate or I've been invited by that person to have them. Otherwise, sympathy is really the most powerful. Now, don't get me wrong. When faced with a situation where someone is doing something that's clearly dangerous to themselves or someone else, that's a different story. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who have gone through trauma, people who have gone through terrible things. It reminds me of when Hurricane Katrina came through. There was this outpouring of sympathy for the people whose lives were destroyed by that disaster. But the next time a hurricane threatened that area of the country, there was a lot of people who said, they being the people who lived there, knew that this could happen again. Now it's their fault for living there. And that's a striking example of how quickly we can move from being sympathetic and offering that comfort to people to blaming them for taking part in a disaster that they did not create. And we have to be really careful of that when dealing with fellow people in recovery, because if we do that, if we really start to make other people feel like they are at the center of disasters and trauma that they did not themselves create, then we really run the risk of not only alienating them, but increasing the very feelings that we're trying to comfort them for in the first place. That's it for today. I'll be back here tomorrow with more. Have a good one.